The Indo-European language family consists of an estimated 445 living languages that are broadly distributed across Europe and parts of Asia. Within this family, there are 5 major branches: Celtic, Italic, Germanic, Balto-Slavic, and Indo-Iranian. While these modern languages appear quite diverse and unrelated on the surface, their common origin can be traced back thousands of years. However, with little evidence beyond preserved archaeological sites, the exact origin and mechanism of expansion of the Proto-Indo-European languages has puzzled linguistic experts for over a century. In 1973, Maria Gabuntas hypothesized that Proto-Indo-European languages originated with the expansion of nomadic Kurgan people of the Russian steppes around 6000 before present. By assessing the linguistic association of cognates, Gabuntas found associations between Kurgan words and Proto-Indo-European words, especially in words for technological innovations which occurred during the expansion of Kurgan people. However, in 1987, a new theory was proposed by Colin Renfrew. Renfrew argued that the cognate association of limited Kurgan words was not substantial evidence for Proto-Indo-European expansion, and that the Kurgan people were likely not advanced enough to conquer and influence such a broad expanse of land. Renfrew hypothesized that instead, Indo-European languages spread due to the expansion of agriculture from the Anatolian region to northern Europe between 8,000 and 9,500 years ago. Linguistics experts using glottochronological methods have asserted that the time-depth estimates for language branching following an expansion from Anatolia fit better than a more recent Kurgan expansion. Additionally, using a Bayesian phylogeographic method comparing modern versus Proto-Indo-European languages, experts found a stronger cognate association with the agricultural expansion approach. Thus, while the mystery of Indo-European language expansion is far from solved, it appears as though the language family more likely originated and branched due to agricultural expansion.
Studies of sediment cores from Swedish lakes dated to around 4100 BCE show a rapid increase in the amount of microcharcoals coinciding with a decrease in the amount of pollen from numerous tree species. Shortly after this period, pollen from several types of weeds only associated with agriculture, including ribwort plantain, also appear in these cores. These facts likely indicate that early farmers appeared in southern Scandinavia around 6,000 years ago and used slash and burn techniques to create open areas where crops could be cultivated. It is believed that the first farmers in Scandinavia were migrants from Central Europe. Support for this notion comes from DNA analysis performed on skeletal remains found throughout Europe and dated to the Neolithic. When the mitochondrial DNA of these remains was examined, it was found that the remains of farmers had haplogroups typically associated with Central Europe. Additionally, as shown in this graph, remains from foraging groups had different haplogroups than the farmers, indicating that they were initially 2 distinct groups. Other evidence for this idea comes from the abrupt appearance of different styles of flint axes in the archaeological record during the early Neolithic. These axes were typically used to clear forests for farmland or as tools for processing cereal crops. Large groups of these axes, dated to around 5,300 years before present, have been found in Scandinavia at sites well inland and with soil ideal for agriculture. This indicates that the people who brought this technology to the area had their own distinct cultural practices when they arrived, which likely indicated agriculture. Once the first farmers arrived in Central Europe, it is unclear if agriculture spread rapidly or if foraging remained common in some areas. Using well-preserved lipids found on early Neolithic potsherds from archaeological sites in southern Scandinavia, scientists were able to discern the original use for these vessels and thus learn about the lifestyles of the people who used them. Based on unique chemical signatures of certain biomarkers and isotopes, some pots were determined to have been exclusively associated with agriculture, and some with foraging. However, other vessels had clearly been used to hold marine resources long after agriculture was introduced to an area. A good example of this phenomenon is on the isolated island of Zealand, which lies between Sweden and Denmark. Potsherds found here indicate that marine resources were still being utilized 300 years after domesticated cattle were introduced to the island. A number of factors have affected the Earth's climate throughout recent geologic time, including volcanic eruptions and orbital forcings. Many scientists have argued that these variations affected human domestication and cultivation of different plants and animals. One example, represented by this graph, is the 8.2 event that caused an abrupt temperature decrease around 6,200 BCE. Some researchers think this could have forced people to experiment with different food sources when wild resources became less abundant, and could have led to more people adopting agriculture as their main source of food. Before agriculture was brought to Scandinavia, the subarctic climate created an extremely short growing season and most of the land was covered with boreal forests. The available record of pollen and insect remains shows that around 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, the climate warmed enough that deciduous forests began replacing boreal forests as wildfires occurred. As deciduous trees require longer and warmer summers to grow compared to boreal conifers, This indicates that agriculture would have become far more practical than earlier, and cereals originating in the Levant could now theoretically be grown in Scandinavia. Pollen evidence also indicates a notable increase in hazel trees, an important crop for hazelnuts, coinciding with the appearance of cereal crops in Scandinavia. To summarize, agriculture was brought to Scandinavia around 6,000 years ago by Central European migrants, who also likely brought the Proto-Indo-European language with them. There were likely many factors that encouraged people to migrate to this area and led to foragers adopting agriculture, and while a hospitable climate was likely one of them, the current research doesn't seem to show that it was the ultimate factor.